Hey everyone, welcome to another deep dive. As public servants, I think we all kind of know that feeling of wanting to make a real difference,
Yeah.
in people's lives, like why we do what we do.
Right.
But sometimes those big ideas or, well-intentioned projects, well, they don't quite go as planned.
Yeah, happens.
So today we're diving into this whole concept of innovation failure. And that, don't worry, this isn't about, pointing fingers or anything like that.
Yeah.
We're going to be using a paper as our guide from the journal Technovation.
Yeah.
And believe me, it's got some seriously practical advice
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff.
on how to actually get better at innovating.
Absolutely. And it really flips the script on how we usually think about failure, especially in the public sector, right? Where there's always that pressure to succeed.
Huge pressure, yeah.
Yeah.
So where do we even begin with, unpacking this innovation failure thing?
Well, I think the first thing is we got to kind of get past that like knee-jerk reaction to failure, like failure equals bad.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
This paper wants us to see failure not like a full stop, but like a comma,
Okay,
a pause to like reflect,
yeah.
a chance to maybe change course a little, and ultimately it can be like a springboard to better solutions for the people we serve.
I am liking this reframing already, can I say.
Good.
But let's get practical.
Okay.
The paper mentions these two core types of failure within the innovation process itself.
Yes.
Task failures and outcome failures.
Uh-huh.
Can you break those down for us?
Sure. So think of it this way. Imagine you're trying to put together this new program to help folks, access affordable housing.
Okay.
A task failure would be like forgetting to include landlords, in that initial design phase.
Oh,
You're doing the task of designing a program,
right.
but you're missing this crucial piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, that's going to cause some problems down the line.
Sure.
So then an outcome failure would be,
An outcome failure is when the result isn't what you wanted, even if you did everything right in the process. So let's say your housing program, it launches smoothly, all the paperwork is in order, but it turns out the eligibility rules are so strict that almost nobody qualifies.
Oh, wow.
The intention was good,
Right.
but the outcome isn't actually helping people find affordable housing.
It's like that saying, measure twice, cut once.
Yeah,
But for public service innovation,
exactly.
we need to be thinking about the process, but also the impact on the people we serve.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
So what's interesting is that the paper talks about how these two types of failure can actually combine, and they can kind of like cascade through the whole innovation process.
They do.
And they use this analogy of the Swiss cheese model, where each stage is like a slice of cheese.
Okay.
And the holes represent those points of failure.
I like it.
So, you have a few task failures here and there. It might not be a disaster.
Right.
But if those holes line up across different stages, well, whoosh, you got a major problem.
Yeah, it's a great analogy.
I'm getting a visual of like Swiss cheese with giant holes, and it's not pretty.
No, it's not.
But this is where understanding the stages of the innovation process becomes so important.
Yes.
And the paper talks about this double diamond model. Can you walk us through that?
Yeah, so the double diamond, it's just a way to visualize, the phases of innovation.
Okay.
Think of it like two diamonds connected at their points.
Okay.
The first diamond is all about the problem space.
Okay.
So we start by like exploring broadly all the problems related to an issue,
Right.
and then we try to define the specific problem that we want to tackle.
So first you zoom out to get that big picture.
Yes.
And then you zoom in.
Exactly.
Is that it?
Then we go to the second diamond, the solution space.
Okay.
Here we diverge again, we brainstorm all kinds of potential solutions to that problem, and then finally we kind of converge on the best solution to develop and deliver.
Explore, focus, belief. Explore again, and then focus on the solution.
You got it.
But here's where it gets interesting for us in public service, right?
Yes.
The paper is saying that how we think about failure actually changes throughout this process.
It does.
That's so interesting.
And I think it resonates with anyone who's worked in government,
Oh, yeah?
in those early phases where we're exploring problems, brainstorming solutions. There's a lot more room for, experimenting.
For sure.
We expect more failures in those stages,
Yeah.
and we tend to see them as valuable.
So it's like we're giving ourselves permission to try things out,
Exactly.
knowing that not everything's going to work perfectly.
Yeah.
But then as we move into those later phases,
Mhm.
where decisions are being made, resources are being allocated,
Yeah.
that tolerance for failure, it kind of starts to shrink, doesn't it?
It does. We get really focused on making things work.
Right.
And the pressure to avoid those mistakes, it definitely intensifies.
And of course, As the project goes on and we've invested more time, energy,
Yeah.
and taxpayer dollars,
Right.
we become even less likely to accept failure.
Yeah. Nobody wants to admit they messed up.
Oh, the dreaded sunk cost fallacy.
Ah, it gets us all.
We've all been there, but
Yeah.
but here's the thing. This paper isn't just about, avoiding failure at all costs. It's
Yeah.
about understanding these different modes of failure and how we can actually use some types of failure to improve our work.
Exactly. And that's where these 4 modes of innovation failure come in.
Okay, I am intrigued. Tell me more.
Each mode has a different level of anticipation and value,
Hmm.
and understanding these can help us make better decisions about how to approach risk and innovation.
Okay, I am officially intrigued. Let's dive into these 4 failure modes. What's the first one on the list?
So the first one is called unsolicited failures. And honestly, these are the ones that nobody wants.
All right.
They're unexpected, often preventable, and usually they don't teach us much beyond, don't do that again.
So these are the failures that make us want to bury our heads in the sand.
Pretty much.
Okay.
Like imagine you spend months on this new public outreach campaign,
Yeah.
only to realize you completely missed the mark on what your audience needs.
Out.
Yeah, all that time and effort wasted, and now you got to scramble to fix it.
That is painful. So how can we avoid these unsolicited failures?
Well, prevention is key.
Okay.
The paper talks about the importance of clear processes,
Yeah.
thorough training,
Yeah.
and regular checks to make sure everyone's on the same page.
Yeah.
It's about building in those quality control measures to catch those holes in the cheese before they become big problems.
Solid advice prevention is definitely better than cure, especially in public service where resources are already so stretched.
Right.
Okay. Now I'm a little nervous to hear about the next type of failure.
Well, the second mode, hazardous failures, might sound intimidating, but it's really just acknowledging that some risks are just part of the work we do.
Oh.
These are the failures that we know are possible,
Uh-huh.
but there's still bad news often with, big consequences.
So these are the ones that keep us up at night, where we know there's a chance things could go wrong, but the potential benefits are so big that we push forward anyway,
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
like a public health initiative that unexpectedly backfires,
Exactly.
or a new policy that has these unintended negative consequences for certain people.
Yeah. You can try to anticipate and mitigate the risk, but sometimes they still happen.
The stakes are so high for us.
Yeah.
It's not just numbers on a spreadsheet.
No.
We're talking about real people's lives here.
Exactly.
So what's the best way to deal with these hazardous ventures?
So the paper suggests this 3-pronged approach: prediction, modification, and mitigation.
Yeah.
We can use data risk analysis to try to minimize those chances of things going wrong.
Uh-huh.
And if they do happen, we need to have plans in place to contain the damage and adapt.
It sounds like a lot of what-if planning,
It is.
which can be challenging, but so crucial.
It is.
Thinking through those worst-case scenarios and having those backup plans ready
Yeah.
can make a huge difference. But please tell me, there are types of failure that we can actually look forward to.
Oh, there are. Absolutely. And that brings us to the third mode, fortuitous failures.
Okay.
These are the happy accidents of innovation.
Okay.
They're the unexpected wins
Mm-hmm.
where something goes wrong, but it actually ends up revealing a better way forward.
These sound like my kind of failure.
Well, you might say that.
It's like when a program designed for one purpose ends up helping a whole other group of people you hadn't even considered.
Yeah.
Pure serendipity.
Exactly. And the paper uses this great example of the IDEO shopping cart redesign.
Oh, yeah. IDEO, those are the folks who designed the first Apple mouse, right?
That's right.
Very cool.
So they were tasked with, reimagining the shopping cart,
Uh-huh.
and their designers are watching people using them in stores.
Okay.
And they notice that parents are having a hard time lifting their kids into the cart.
Oh, yeah.
And they think, aha, we need to design a cart with a built-in child seat.
Makes sense.
But then they see another problem.
What's that?
People stealing shopping carts
Oh,
and
yeah.
using them to, transport their stuff.
Oh, wow.
This wasn't even part of the plan,
Right.
but it sparks this whole new way of thinking about how to design a cart that's user-friendly and theft-proof.
I love that example.
Yeah,
It's about being open to those unexpected things, even if they seem totally unrelated.
it is.
So how do we create that kind of environment in public service where those happy accidents are more likely to happen?
It's about building a culture that's curious, observant and willing to deviate from the script.
Right.
The paper calls the response to this kind of failure probe, expose, extrapolate.
Okay.
We need to be actively looking for those unexpected insights,
Right.
willing to share them, and then figure out how to apply what we've learned.
It's about fostering curiosity and encouraging people to look beyond the obvious. which can be tough in a bureaucratic environment.
Yeah, can be.
But it's so important. Okay, now for the final mode, the grand finale of failure.
Okay, so the fourth mode is excursive failures.
Okay. These are the failures we actually seek out,
Yeah.
knowing they might lead us in a new and better direction.
Wow.
Think of pilot programs, experimental initiatives, or those big moonshot ideas where failure is not just accepted, it's expected.
Okay.
Right?
These excursive failures, they sound like my kind of failure.
I knew you'd like that one.
It's that bold, innovative spirit of public service where you're willing to try something radically different, knowing that even if it doesn't work out exactly as planned, you're going to learn so much.
Yeah, exactly.
So how do we make that happen?
Well, it's about creating a safe space for experimentation where people aren't afraid to fail.
It's about shifting the mindset from failure is bad to failure is data.
Exactly.
Love it.
Okay. The paper suggests a three-pronged response to this kind of failure.
Yep.
Facilitate, analyze, harness.
Uh-huh.
We need to create an environment where people feel safe to experiment.
Right.
Then we need to analyze what worked and what didn't.
And finally, we need to capture the value of that learning and apply it to future projects.
So it's a constant process of exploration, analysis, and adaptation.
It is.
Constantly pushing the boundaries.
Yes.
I love it. Now let's just take a moment to let all this sink in.
Sure.
We've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
From redefining failure to exploring these 4 different modes of failure, all within the context of, serving the public good.
And what's exciting is that by embracing these different ways of thinking about failure, we can become more effective and innovative in how we serve our citizens.
For sure.
It's about moving away from that fear of failure and seeing it as a tool for learning and growth.
It's about empowering ourselves to take risks,
Yes.
learn from our mistakes, and ultimately create better outcomes for the people we serve.
Exactly.
So for you listening out there, think about your own work. Which mode of failure are you most comfortable with? Are there areas where you could benefit from embracing some types of failure?
It's a good question.
We'll be right back after a quick break to dive deeper into those questions.
It's interesting you say that because I think a lot of us in public service, we kind of gravitate towards those unsolicited failures. Like,
Right.
we want to avoid those preventable mistakes at all costs.
Right, that makes sense.
But this paper, it makes a really compelling case for intentionally exploring those excursive failures, those calculated risks where you're stepping outside that comfort zone to try something really new.
Yeah, that resonates with me. It's so easy to get stuck in that rut, doing things the way they've always been done, especially in a bureaucratic setting.
It is.
But if we really want to serve our communities in the best way possible, we have to be willing to embrace those what-if moments and create that space for experimentation.
Absolutely. Think about like a pilot program for a new social service.
Okay.
By its very nature, a pilot program is designed to test an idea in a controlled environment.
Right.
We expect there to be some bumps in the road, things that don't work out as planned. But that's the whole point. We're gathering data, we're learning from those failures, and refining the program before rolling it out, on a bigger scale.
It's like building a prototype before mass production.
Exactly.
We wouldn't expect the first version of some new technology to be perfect.
Right.
We iterate, we test, we learn from those early failures, and that's how we get to a solution that actually works.
Exactly. And the beauty of this approach is it allows us to fail small and learn quickly.
Yeah.
Rather than, risking a huge failure down the line.
Right. Huge cost savings too, potentially.
Absolutely. And more importantly, you're potentially avoiding those negative impacts on the people you serve.
And that's the whole point.
Right.
That's what matters. So how can we as public servants, how can we encourage this culture of experimentation and embrace those excursive failures?
It starts with creating psychological safety.
Okay.
People need to know it's okay to take risks, to try new things, and that if they fail, they won't be punished.
Right.
In fact, it should be seen as an opportunity to learn and grow.
I love that idea. But that's easier said than done in some government agencies, right?
Oh, for sure.
Where that fear of making a mistake can be so paralyzing.
Absolutely. But we can start by changing the language we use around failure.
Okay. How so?
So instead of talking about success and failure, what if we talked about experiments and learnings?
I love that.
Right.
It takes the pressure off and it reframes the whole thing as a chance to discover something new.
Exactly. And it aligns perfectly with what the paper suggests. Facilitate, analyze, and harness those failures.
Yeah, we need to create those structures and processes that support experimentation.
Yes.
But we also have to be really rigorous about analyzing the results. You know,
Right,
all
that's not
good and
true.
the bad.
Yeah.
What worked, what didn't, what surprised us.
Uh,
And how can we use that information to make better decisions in the future and improve how we work?
yeah, it's about building a culture of continuous learning and improvement,
Yeah.
where we're not afraid to challenge the status quo and try new things.
And this brings us back to those fortuitous failures, those happy accidents that can lead to those breakthrough innovations.
Yes.
It seems like there's a connection there, right?
Or is.
A kind of feedback loop between intentionally looking for those excursive failures and being open to those unexpected wins.
You're exactly right. The more we create that space for experimentation, the more likely we are to stumble upon those unexpected discoveries.
Yeah.
And when we approach those discoveries with curiosity and a willingness to learn, they can spark completely new ways of thinking
Totally.
and lead to solutions that we never could have imagined.
It's like that saying, chance favors the prepared mind.
It does.
The more we're out there exploring and experimenting, the more likely we are to be in the right place at the right time to capitalize on those moments of serendipity.
Absolutely. But even with the best intentions and a culture that embraces, experimentation, we're still going to encounter those hazardous failures,
Right.
those risks that are just part of the work. So how do we manage those risks while still, making sure that innovation happens?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
It's a delicate balance, and there's no easy answer.
Yeah.
But I think the key is transparency.
Okay.
We need to be honest with ourselves, with our colleagues, and with the public about the potential risks involved in any new initiative.
Transparency is key, but it can be really challenging in a political environment
Yeah.
where admitting there's a risk can be seen as a weakness.
You're right. It's not always easy, but I
Yeah.
think we need to change the conversation from avoid failure at all costs
Mhm.
to manage risk responsibly.
I like that.
And that means being upfront about the potential downsides, having those contingency plans in place, and being ready to adapt if things don't go as expected.
It's about being proactive rather than reactive.
Yes.
And it's about building trust with the public by showing them that we're taking their well-being seriously.
Exactly. And of course, we can't forget about those unsolicited failures,
Yeah.
those preventable mistakes that can derail even the best plans. The bane of every public servant's existence.
But even those unsolicited failures, they can be valuable learning opportunities if we approach them with the right mindset.
What do you mean by that?
Well, instead of just, sweeping those mistakes under the rug or playing the blame game, what if we used them to improve our processes?
Okay.
Let's say a new program rollout gets totally botched because of a communication breakdown between departments.
Uh-huh.
Instead of just, reprimanding the people involved, we could take a step back and analyze what happened.
Okay.
Were there clear communication protocols in place? Was there enough training on the new program?
It's about turning those oops moments into aha moments.
Exactly. By digging deeper and understanding the root causes of those unsolicited failures,
Uh-huh.
we can figure out where we need to strengthen our processes, improve our training, or maybe clarify our communication.
Right.
And that ultimately leads to a more efficient and effective government that can better serve its citizens.
So it's not just about avoiding failure. It's about using failure to make positive change.
Precisely. And it's about creating a culture where we're all learning and growing together,
Yeah.
constantly trying to improve how we serve the public.
This has been so insightful. Thank you for walking us through these 4 modes of innovation failure and for helping us rethink how we think about risk and experimentation and success in the public sector.
My pleasure.
Now, before we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought.
Okay.
We've talked a lot about failing during the innovation process.
Right.
But what about failing to innovate at all?
Ooh.
That's something to think about, isn't it?
It is. That's a really good question.
We'll be back after a quick break to explore that question and share some final takeaways. All right, we're back. And I want to go back to that question we left you with.
Yeah.
What about failing to innovate at all? It's easy to get so caught up in the day-to-day demands of this work,
Oh, yeah.
putting out fires, keeping the wheels turning. But if we're not, actively looking for ways to improve, to do things better, to serve our citizens more effectively, are we really succeeding?
That's a really good point, and it speaks to this bigger challenge that I think we see a lot in the public sector. We often operate under this immense pressure to maintain the status quo, to not rock the boat.
Right.
But the world is constantly changing. The
Yeah.
needs of our citizens are evolving.
Mhm.
Technology is disrupting, everything. And the challenges we face are getting more complex. So So if we're not innovating, we are falling behind. Yeah, it's like they say, if you're not moving forward, you're falling behind. But in public service, the consequences of not innovating, they can be so much bigger than just losing market share or something.
Right.
We're talking about the well-being of our communities,
Yeah.
the effectiveness of our programs and the trust that our citizens place in us.
Exactly. And it's not just about, adopting the newest technology or launching these flashy new initiatives.
Right.
True innovation, it's about constantly questioning those assumptions, challenging the way we've always done things, and looking for new and better ways to solve problems and serve people. It's about embracing that growth mindset, that belief that we can always learn and get better, even if it means, making mistakes along the way. And this brings us back to those four modes of innovation failure.
Yes, it
By
does.
understanding these different types of failure and by creating a culture that embraces, experimentation and learning, we
Yeah.
can actually reduce the risk of that ultimate failure, failing to innovate at all.
I love that it's like a paradox, right?
Yeah.
By embracing failure, by seeing it as valuable data and a catalyst for growth, we actually increase our chances of success.
Yeah.
And more importantly, we create a more dynamic and responsive and effective public service that's really ready to meet the challenges that we face.
So to our listeners out there, I encourage you, embrace those what-if moments. Look for those chances to experiment and celebrate the learning that comes from both success and failure.
Yeah.
Remember, innovation, it's not a one-time event.
Yeah.
It's a continuous journey.
It is.
And by embracing those four modes of innovation failure, you can navigate that journey with confidence and create a real lasting impact on the communities you serve.
And don't underestimate the power of those small changes.
Yeah.
Those little improvements that add up over time.
For sure.
That's not always about those big sweeping reforms. Sometimes the most meaningful innovations come from those little aha moments,
Yeah.
those small changes to a process or a program that make a real difference in people's lives.
Absolutely. It's about being mindful and being curious and being willing to try new things and recognizing that failure isn't the opposite of success. It's just a step on the path to getting there.
Well said.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into innovation failure.
Yeah.
We hope you found it valuable, and we encourage you to share these ideas with your colleagues and keep the conversation going about how we can all work together to create a more innovative and effective public service.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening, everyone.